I'm Angela Wolf, fashion designer and online instructor, and hopefully you finished your jacket throughout this whole season. But maybe you want to add a button. You could add one button to just keep the jacket closed. There's variations here. This is even bound buttonholes. You have a lot of ideas on there. So let me give you some tips for sewing a button. First off, on your facing piece, you would already have interfacing. Just make sure that your fabric is nicely pressed. And I like to use fabric marking tools. This is just chalk. I usually give myself a guide. So if you're going to use one button, it's a little bit easier than adding a few more. But what I'm going to do is, if this was the edge of my coat, I'm going to give myself a chalk mark about 1 inch away. This isn't a blouse. This is a jacket. So you at least want to be 1 inch. I have gone all the way up to 2 inches. It really depends on the size of your button. If I just took this one right off of the box, so sorry about the string there. So you don't want your button hanging off the top. It needs to be placed inside here, with at least a 1/4 of an inch on the edge. I usually like to be a little bit safer with 1/2 of an inch, if that makes sense. So this 1 inch, if that's where I'm going to put my buttonhole is going to be about right there. That's where it's going to start. It just gives me a guide, okay? And this chalk just rubs right off. The next thing you want to do is, are you going to do this with a buttonhole? Look at how I'm lining these up. Perpendicular to the front edge. Or, like my jacket here, are you going to do them on the angle? I also did it on the angle on the jacket behind me, but here you go. That would be an angle one. So I would start my buttonhole here and go out and continue on. All right, so your buttonhole foot might look different than mine, so check your manual. And you can only make your buttonhole as big as this foot will go. So for this button here, I would actually go to the embroidery part of my machine and do an embroidered buttonhole. So let me just show you on a regular button that can fit in here how this works. Just slap your foot into place. Go to your buttonhole screen, choose a buttonhole, any size, it doesn't matter. And the last thing is, this machine, I have to pull this band down, and that will tell it how big of a buttonhole to make. Put my foot down, and let the machine do its work. This is just wonderful. And you can do so many buttonholes in a row, however many you need. Use the chalk as a guide and follow that. Then all of your buttonholes will be straight. And that's it. So I will do that for all of my buttonholes, however far apart they are. So let me just give you a few more tips before we wrap this up. Here is a foot that you can actually sew a button in with, but the button has to fit in this area right through here. So this one won't work because this is what you call a shank. I will have to sew that one on by hand. And this one will work. You just have to make sure that it can fit on the button. So I could actually sew these on by hand. And for the buttonholes, when I go to add more, on a jacket, you want them further apart than a shirt. Maybe a shirt, you have them every 1.5 inches. So for a bigger button like this, my next one would be probably way up here. That's 1, 2, 3, almost 4 inches apart. So keep that into consideration as well. The last thing you'll do for your buttonhole is, on the wrong side, add a little bit of fray check, something like that on there to keep it from fraying, and use your buttonhole cutter. If you have a shank, you might have a circle at the end. Just punch those through and your button's fine. One more thing, these are closed. Some of my buttonholes I don't open, like the jacket that I'm wearing here. These are all fake. So they don't necessarily have to open if you're worried about the fabric fraying, things like that. So this is a wrap on the jacket. You can add buttonholes anywhere. You can add buttonholes on the sleeve. How about on this jacket here, where I added a button on here? All these ideas. So I hope you're inspired to sew a jacket. I can't wait to see what your trench looks like.